On dating apps, a perfect match can be an algorithm's dream or a predator's design. The story begins when Clara, a web designer whose world was confined to the sterile glow of her dual monitors, decided to combat the encroaching silence of her minimalist apartment. She craved a connection that transcended code and pixels, a flicker of spontaneity in her meticulously ordered life. The app presented Leo, a profile so flawlessly curated, it felt like a statistical anomaly. His photos showcased a life of adventure and effortless charm, sun-drenched landscapes, candid smiles in bustling cafes, a life lived entirely outdoors. Clara, a creature of logic, was skeptical yet intrigued. She swiped right. The match was instantaneous. As she scrolled through his pictures again, a small cold knot formed in her stomach. In a photo of Leo on a dramatic cliffside, a tiny detail in the corner of the frame caught her eye. A small terracotta pot with a distinctively chipped rim, housing a single, resilient succulent. She froze, her gaze drifting from the screen to her own windowsill, where the exact same pot sat, a silent witness to her solitary existence. It had to be a coincidence, a bizarre trick of the light. She dismissed the detail as digital noise, a fragment of recycled data in the vast, impersonal ocean of the internet. For 2 days, her logic held the rising tide of fear at bay. She told herself it was a common pot from a popular chain store, that her mind was simply pattern matching, a professional hazard of a life spent finding order in chaos. She exchanged a few sterile messages with Leo, his replies always charming, yet oddly generic, as if generated by a sophisticated chatbot. He never mentioned the photo, and she dared not ask. The unease, however, lingered like a phantom limb, an itch she could not scratch. On the third night, a notification pulsed from her phone. Leo had updated his profile. With trembling fingers, she opened the app. A new picture dominated the screen, a cozy, domestic scene. A person's view looking down at a book, resting on a distinctively patterned armchair. It was a vintage paisley print, a one-of-a-kind piece she had spent months hunting for at flea markets. A faded hand-knitted blue throw blanket was draped over its arm, exactly as she had left it that morning. The book in the photo was the same paperback she was currently reading, its cover creased at the same page. Every detail was a perfect, horrifying mirror of a corner of her own living room, a space no camera but her own had ever seen. The blood drained from her face as she stared, her sanctuary violated through a screen. Her frantic search for an explanation ceased as another photo loaded, a close-up of the chipped teacup on her nightstand, the image clearly taken from the foot of her bed. Panic seized her, a cold chemical flood that bypassed thought and went straight to her nerves. The apartment, once her sanctuary, was now a hostile terrarium, and she was the specimen under observation. There was no glitch, no coincidence. Someone was inside, or had been. The timeline was a terrifying blur. She scrambled to her bedroom door, slamming it shut and fumbling with the lock, her fingers slick with sweat. Her breath came in ragged, silent gasps. Every shadow seemed to coalesce into a humanoid shape. Every hum from her refrigerator sounded like a footstep. She ripped the Ethernet cable from her computer, severing her connection to the outside world, as if that could somehow sever his. Her phone screen lit up again. It was him. A new message from Leo, but it wasn't a photo. It was an audio file. 1 minute and 12 seconds of silence according to the timestamp. But against every instinct, her thumb hovered over the play icon. She needed to know. She pressed it, holding the phone to her ear. The silence was not empty. It was filled with the soft, almost imperceptible sound of her own rhythmic breathing as she slept. It was the sound of her bedroom in the dead of night, a recording of her at her most vulnerable. The recording continued for a full minute. Then the breathing was joined by a second sound, a low, male whisper right next to the microphone that breathed her name, Clara. He wasn't watching through a camera. He had been in the room with her. She lunged for her phone to dial 911, but a new notification from her smart home app flashed across the screen. Front door locked. The message on the screen was a digital tombstone for her safety. Locked, not to keep him out, but to seal her in. The apartment, once a sprawling space of solitude, instantly compressed, its walls shrinking until it felt no larger than a coffin. The air grew thick and heavy. Outside her bedroom door, the silence was absolute, a heavy blanket that smothered all other senses. Then it was broken. A single, deliberate creak of a floorboard in the hall. A pause that stretched for an eternity. Another creak, closer this time. He wasn't hunting. He was strolling through his new property. He was in control. Adrenaline surged through Clara, a jolt of pure, cold clarity. He was using the app, the technology, as his weapon. It was his stage, and she would have to use it as hers. Her fingers flew across her keyboard, reconnecting the severed cable. Her screen flickered to life, a beacon in the suffocating darkness, ignoring the pounding in her chest that matched the slow, approaching footsteps. She opened the dating app one last time. His profile picture, the smiling man on the cliffside, seemed to mock her. She navigated to her own profile, her digital ghost. With surgical precision, she deleted her bio, her interests, her carefully selected photos. In the empty text box, she typed a desperate, final broadcast to the digital void, a message in a bottle thrown into an ocean of strangers. Help, APT 7B, 1412 Oak Street. A man is inside my home. His profile is Leo. He is here now. Call the police. She hit save, her changes going live to anyone who might be scrolling, swiping, searching. The footsteps in the hall stopped directly outside her door. The silence returned, heavier than before, pregnant with imminent violence. Her phone lit up one last time with a notification from him. It wasn't a photo or a sound. It was a single line of text that appeared under his name. It's no fun when you call the police. Then, from the other side of the door, came the soft, metallic click of a key being inserted into the lock. In a world of open windows, some strangers don't just look, they watch. The story begins when Diane, a photographer whose life was curated through a lens, decided to open a small digital window of her own. Her home was a fortress of solitude, every object placed with intention, every shadow, a familiar comfort. The dating app felt like a concession, a necessary evil to quiet the well-meaning chorus of her friends. While swiping through a sea of manufactured smiles, she found it, a profile with no name, no bio, just a single, grainy photograph. The image was dark, shot through the slight distortion of a window pane at dusk. It showed a woman on a couch, lost in a book. It showed Diane in her own living room. A cold wave of violation washed over her. With frantic, shaking hands, she reported the profile. It vanished instantly. For a moment, she could breathe again. Then, a new notification chimed, and a new profile appeared. Its picture a sharp, clear image of her asleep in her own bed. The image was a declaration of war. It was proof of entry, of proximity, of a predator who had stood by her bed and watched her breathe. Every shadow in her room now held his memory. Her sanctuary was a crime scene, and she was the only one who knew it. This time, her fear was sharp and clear, a shard of ice in her chest. She called the police, her voice a thin, trembling wire as she tried to explain the digital haunting. The officer on the other end was professionally calm, his questions like dull, procedural stones. "Do you have an ex-boyfriend, Ms. Albright? Could a friend be playing a prank?" He heard about an image on an app. She was describing the complete dismantling of her safety. Without a direct threat or signs of forced entry, their hands were tied. "Block the user and call us if anything changes," he advised, his tone final. She hung up the phone, a profound and terrifying solitude enveloping her. The systems of the real world had offered no defense. She was alone, trapped in a nightmare governed by a single, silent observer. Her phone buzzed, the screen illuminating a new notification from the app. The stalker's profile had updated. The single photo was now a grid of 9, creating a chilling photo album of her past few days. She stared at the grid, a mosaic of her stolen privacy. Each square was a monument to her ignorance. Diane at her drafting table, head bowed in concentration. Diane staring into her refrigerator, bathed in its cold, artificial light. And the most recent one, in the center square, time-stamped just minutes ago. A photo of her on the phone, her face streaked with tears of pure frustration. He was watching her, not through a camera planted days ago, but live somehow, at that very moment. A wave of nausea hit her as she finally understood the depth of her exposure. This wasn't just stalking, it was a performance, and her life was the stage. She deleted the app, a futile act of digital defiance, and threw the phone onto the couch. It was too late. A moment later, the screen lit up with a text message from an unknown number. It contained no words, only an attachment. It was the photo of her crying, but now with a crude smiley face drawn over her tears. The message that followed was simple. "That's better." Her breath hitched. He was no longer just an observer. He was now a critic, an editor of her suffering, trying to shape her reality to his liking. She backed away from the windows, from the open spaces of her own home, and locked herself in the windowless bathroom, sinking to the cold tile floor in the suffocating dark. Her phone buzzed again on the sink. A new text, "I can still see you." And from the hallway, right outside the bathroom door, came the soft, unmistakable sound of a camera shutter clicking. The click was a punctuation mark at the end of her sanity. He was there. The text message wasn't a guess. It was a statement of fact. In the suffocating pitch-black darkness of the bathroom, he could still see her. The thought defied all logic, a supernatural violation that was more terrifying than any physical threat. How? Her photographer's mind, racing through the panic, seized on the only possible answer. It wasn't magic. It was technology, a lens. Her eyes, now adjusted to the gloom, scanned the door, the walls, searching for the anomaly, and then she saw it, a tiny faint glint of reflected light, high on the door, no bigger than a pinprick, the unblinking eye of a hidden camera. Her phone, the source of her torment, was still clutched in her hand. It was a beacon, a leash, but it was also a weapon. It had a flash, a blinding burst of concentrated light designed to overwhelm any lens. With the silence stretching, her own breathing sounded like a storm. She could hear his, too, a soft, steady rhythm just on the other side of the door. He was waiting, enjoying this. She raised the phone, her thumb finding the camera icon. She aimed the lens at the glint on the door and pressed the button, firing a blinding strobe into the darkness, again and again. A strangled cry came from the hallway, followed by a heavy thud against the door, then complete and total silence. She waited, heart hammering, for what felt like an eternity. A small white square began to slide slowly from under the door, a freshly developed photograph. It was a picture of her, on the floor, phone raised, taken an instant before the first flash. Grief has a digital echo, but when the ghost in the machine knows your secrets, it's not a memory. It's a trap. The story begins when Sandra, a year after Robert's death, finally yielded to the gentle pressure of her friends. The house was still a museum dedicated to him, his favorite mug by the sink, his reading glasses on the nightstand. Creating a dating profile felt like a profound betrayal, an act of vandalism in a sacred space. She chose her photos with a heavy heart, wrote a bio that felt like a lie, and sent her ghost into the digital ether. She expected nothing, perhaps a few awkward conversations that would reaffirm her solitude. Instead, her phone chimed almost instantly. A new match. Her breath caught in her throat. The profile name was Robert. The picture was his, the one from their last anniversary, the one she kept on her bedside table, where he was smiling, his eyes full of a life that was now just an ache in her memory. A sick, cold anger washed over her. It was a prank, a monstrously cruel joke. She raised a trembling thumb to report the profile, to erase this horrific digital desecration of the man she loved. Before she could press the button, a message from him appeared on the screen. It said, "You're still wearing my old sweatshirt. It always looked better on you." The words on the screen bypassed all logic and struck her heart with the force of a physical blow. She looked down at the frayed cuffs of the gray sweatshirt, his scent still clinging to the fabric like a memory. It was impossible. This wasn't a prankster who knew of Robert. This was an eye that could see into her home, into her bubble of grief. Her anger dissolved into a terrifying, intoxicating cocktail of fear and hope. With trembling fingers, she typed a reply, a test for the ghost in her phone. "What did you whisper to me right after we said our vows?" No one else on earth could know the answer. The reply was instantaneous, a single sentence that shattered her reality, that I'd have married you in a hurricane, just to see your hair in the wind. Tears streamed down her face, tears of sorrow and of a joy so profound it was agonizing. It was him. Somehow, it was him. For an hour, they messaged back and forth, a flurry of shared memories and private jokes that felt like a resurrection. Her grief was momentarily replaced by a miraculous connection. Then, a new message appeared. "It's hard to type. I need to hear your voice, and I want you to hear mine." An audio file immediately followed, a small icon of a sound wave that promised the impossible. She pressed play, holding the phone to her ear like a seashell. His voice filled the silence, not a recording, but a clear, present whisper, laced with an unnerving urgency. "They won't let me go, Sandy. They said I need to trade my place with someone else." The voice, so beloved, was now a serpent coiling in her ear. Trade. The word was a splash of ice water, extinguishing the warm, miraculous glow of their reunion. Trade. Her mind recoiled from the implication. This wasn't a rescue. It was a transaction, and the cost was unthinkable. She messaged back, her fingers clumsy and numb. "Robert, that's insane. What are you talking about?" The reply was instant. No longer a lover's whisper, but the cold logic of a captor. "A life for a life, Sandy. It's the only rule they have here. It's the only way home. Don't you want me home?" The question was a perfectly crafted weapon, aimed at the weakest part of her heart. For days, the manipulation continued. It began with small, strange rituals sent via text. "Place my wedding ring in a bowl of salt. Turn all the mirrors to face the wall. Sleep on my side of the bed." Each task was framed as a necessary step, an arcane preparation for his return. Lost in a fog of grief and desperate hope, she obeyed every command. Her loving home slowly transformed into a place of unsettling ceremony, the artifacts of their love repurposed for a dark purpose. She felt him growing closer with each fulfilled request, a presence coalescing in the shadows of the house. Finally, after a week of her unwavering obedience, a new audio message arrived. His voice was different now, not pleading, but filled with a cold, clear authority. It was the voice of a man giving a final, non-negotiable order. The young man who delivers your groceries. He comes tomorrow at 5. His name is Ben. All you have to do is leave the cellar door open, Sandy. Just leave it open and let him bring the bags inside. I will do the rest. The voice delivered the command, and the world fractured. Ben, the quiet, polite college student with kind eyes who carried her groceries inside every Friday. The entity had given him a name, a face, a time of death, and it had handed her the knife. In that instant, the magical grief-soaked fog that had clouded her mind for a week finally dissipated, burned away by the cold, stark horror of the request. She looked at the photograph of Robert on her nightstand, the real Robert, the man who once rescued a fallen bird from the road, the man who cried during sad movies. He would never have asked this. He would have died a second time to protect an innocent life. The thing on the phone was not her husband. It was a parasite, wearing his memory as a disguise, feasting on her love and sorrow. The choice was never a choice. Her resolve hardened into cold steel. She walked to the cellar, its door a dark maw leading to the foundation of her home. She turned the old iron key in the lock, its grinding sound a definitive finality. It wasn't enough. She strained, pushing her husband's heavy oak bookshelf against it, creating a barricade of knowledge and memory against the encroaching darkness. Her phone began to scream, a torrent of messages, a digital tantrum from the trapped entity. Traitor, you've condemned me. Then, audio files. No longer his beloved voice, but a cacophony of distorted, demonic shrieks that ended in a promise. I will get out. The doorbell rang. It was 5 o'clock. Through the peephole, she saw Ben, smiling, oblivious. She opened the door just a crack, pushed the money into his hand, and told him to leave the bags on the porch. She watched him walk away. Safe. She closed the door, locking it, and leaned against the wood, her body trembling with relief. The house was utterly silent. Then from deep within the earth beneath her feet came a sound that vibrated up through the soles of her shoes. A low, guttural scratching at the bottom of the cellar door, and a voice, no longer from a phone, but from the very foundations of her home, roared a single, damning word. Sandy. The perfect community promises belonging, but the price of entry is sometimes everything you are. The story begins when Lauren, burning with the fire of youthful idealism, severed ties with what she called the broken world and passed through the gates of Aegis. The eco-village was a pastoral dream, a sun-drenched haven of communal gardens, smiling faces, and a profound, intoxicating sense of peace. To fully integrate, all new arrivals were required to use Aegis Connect, the village's bespoke app designed to foster true, harmonious bonds. Lauren, eager to belong, created her profile. The matches were immediate and overwhelming. Noah, with his kind eyes and strong hands. Elias, a thoughtful artist. Jacob, a charismatic leader. They were all perfect. Too perfect. The conversations were warm and welcoming, yet a strange, unnerving pattern began to emerge. They all used the same peculiar phrases. They spoke of the importance of one's contribution, the collective joy of sacrifice, and their breathless anticipation for the annual harvest. Lauren tried to dismiss it as the local vernacular, the charming quirks of an isolated community. But the language was identical, a script recited by different mouths, making the conversations feel less like a connection and more like a carefully calibrated test. The welcoming smiles of their profile pictures started to look less like invitations and more like the masks of a hungry congregation, and she was the intended feast. Within the same hour, in 3 separate simultaneous conversations, Noah, Elias, and Jacob all sent her a nearly identical message. The old barn is the heart of Aegis. You must go there tonight, during the moonrise. It is a pilgrimage every true member must make, alone. The synchronized messages were a splash of icy water on her utopian dream. This was not a coincidence. It was a summons. The illusion of individual connection evaporated, replaced by the chilling realization that she was not conversing with 3 men, but with a single, unified will, wearing 3 different masks. A primal fear, cold and sharp, cut through her idealism. She would not be going to the barn. She typed a polite excuse into the app, a sudden headache, and sent it to all 3. The replies arrived simultaneously, identical to the letter. The community requires harmony from all its members. We will expect you tomorrow. The veiled threat was unmistakable. The next morning, paradise had a different texture. The smiles from the other villagers seemed brittle, their eyes holding her gaze a second too long. The once comforting sense of community now felt like a cage of constant surveillance. Her fear sharpened her senses, and she began to notice the absences. Walking through the communal dining hall, she saw the healthy, vibrant couples in their 20s and 30s, but no one older. There were no elders sharing wisdom, no one with the gentle stoop of age, no one with gray hair. More chillingly, in this village supposedly built on the concept of family and future, there were no children, no laughter peeling through the gardens, no toys left on the pristine lawns, no sound but the placid, unnatural quiet of the adults. Aegis wasn't a growing community. It was a static, sterile exhibit. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. She had to get out. Packing a small bag, she walked with forced calm towards the main gate. The gate, usually wide open in a gesture of welcome, was chained and padlocked. Standing before it were Noah and Jacob, her matches from the app. They were no longer smiling, and the sickles in their hands were not for harvesting wheat. The sickles were not symbolic. They were sharp, polished, and held with a familiarity that spoke of purpose beyond farming. Lauren froze, her escape plan dissolving into a primal, paralyzing fear. Noah and Jacob stood as silent sentinels, their faces blank, their eyes devoid of the warmth they had feigned on the app. They were not her matches, they were her jailers. A calm voice spoke from behind her, smooth and patient. "There is no emergency, Lauren." She turned to see Elias, the 3rd man, approaching from the village square. He held a digital tablet, and unlike the others, he was still smiling. A serene, placid expression that was 1,000 times more terrifying than the naked threat of the sickles. "You seem confused," he said, his tone that of a gentle teacher correcting a student. "When you join Aegis, you join a body. One cannot simply remove a part of oneself without causing great sickness to the whole. Your refusal to come to the barn last night, it created a disharmony, an imbalance." He stepped closer, his smile never wavering. "Your contribution is needed to restore that balance. It is your entire purpose for being here. You are the key to a successful harvest." He saw the uncomprehending terror on her face and sighed, a gesture of patronizing pity. "You still see yourself as a visitor, an outsider. We have already taken care of that." He gestured with his tablet toward the large community notice board next to the gate. A freshly printed flyer was tacked in its center. It was a missing person poster with her face on it. Under the heading "Date Last Seen," it listed tomorrow's date. "We find it's more efficient this way," Elias said softly. "Now come along. The guest of honor has preparations to make." The words, "guest of honor," echoed in her mind, a formal title for a sacrificial lamb. All pretense of choice was gone. Flanked by the silent, imposing figures of Noah and Jacob, she was escorted away from the gate, back into the smiling, manicured jaws of the village. The other residents who had earlier offered her fresh-baked bread and warm greetings now watched her procession with a placid, unnerving reverence. Their faces, illuminated by the setting sun, were a gallery of serene, zealous masks. They weren't hiding a secret anymore. They were celebrating it, and she was the centerpiece of the festivities. Her destination was not a cell, but a small, whitewashed cottage she had never seen before. The room inside was Spartan and unnaturally clean, furnished only with a simple wooden bed. Laid upon it was a plain, white linen dress. To purify yourself for the ceremony, Elias had instructed her before leaving her in the silent, sealed room. At the first sign of the rising moon, they returned for her. The entire village was gathered outside, each member holding a single, unlit candle, as they began the slow, silent march towards the old barn. A low, collective hum started to rise from their chests, a discordant and ancient melody. The barn was cavernous, the air inside thick with the smell of damp earth, and a cloyingly sweet scent, like overripe fruit. In the center of the vast space, where a threshing floor should have been, grew a colossal, gnarled tree, its bark a pale, sickly white, its leafless branches clawing at the rafters. A faint greenish light pulsed rhythmically from deep within its trunk, casting shifting, monstrous shadows. The villagers formed a perfect circle around it, their humming growing in intensity. Elias stood before her, his face ecstatic in the tree's unnatural glow. The body must be fed to maintain its harmony, he whispered, his voice trembling with joy. This is the gift of your contribution, Lauren. You are not an ending. You are a beginning. He placed a hand on her back and gently pushed her forward, out of the circle of villagers and into the open space before the pulsing, hungry heart of Aegis. The humming reached a fever pitch, and with that, their stories came to an end, leaving only one question to haunt you. How do you know when the person on the other side of the screen is building a connection or a cage? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read all of them. See you in the next one.